Hi, I'm Gigi. I'm an ex-Amazon senior leader and interview bar raiser. So this video is part one of a two-part series giving you my best and my favorite Amazon interview tricks and tips. I did originally record it as a single video, and then when I was watching it back, I realized that it was way too long. So I've decided to cut it into two parts. So please do enjoy the video. I just need to let you know I have had a haircut since I did that last video, so please don't be too shocked. Enjoy. So today I'm going to tell you about my 10 favorite tricks and tips for the Amazon interview process. I have my notepad with me so that I don't forget them. So straight into it. Here's number one. Write down the question. Now, many of you will have seen this before. This is my absolute favorite tip of all, but here it is again. Tip number one, write down the question. The reason why you should write down the question is, I think, threefold. The first and most important is so that you don't forget it. I know I laughed there. It sounds a bit funny, but honestly, I cannot tell you how many people I've interviewed over the years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and they're telling me their story and they get into this kind of the groove of the story that they've spent a lot of time preparing, and they literally completely forget why they were telling me the story in the first place, and very frequently say, I can't remember why I was saying that. Can you remind me of the question? If you don't know what question you're answering, then we got a problem. So write it down. And then if you do start to kind of lose your focus, then you can just look down and remind yourself and get back on track. Second reason why you should write it down is it gives you some time. Okay, so the length of time it takes you to write down the question, writing it down, one part of your brain is focusing on forming the letters. The other part of your brain is whirring away, going through that mental index that you have of all of the examples that you've prepared ahead of this Amazon interview in order to find one that matches the question best. Now, we will definitely come back to that point about matching the question best in one of my later tips. So it buys you a bit of time to come up with a really strong example. The third reason why you should write down the question is it can help you identify what I call with my candidates the epicenter of the question. Because as you write it down, you could underline what the key words are in the question. And that will help you make sure that when you're answering the question, that your narrative is heading in the right direction. So for example, if you were asked a question of, tell me about a time where you faced a number of unanticipated obstacles in delivering a key goal, you write that down and you underline the epicenter of that question. So the epicenter of that question is unanticipated obstacles. So you're going to have to come up with an example where you had an important goal and you hit obstacles that you did not expect. It's obstacles. It's plural. So in this story that you tell to satisfy the question, it needs to be a story where you hit multiple obstacles that you had not expected in order to achieve a key goal. So epicenter, right? That's another reason why writing it down is useful, because you can underline. A very good thing to practice. So that was number one, write down the question. Number two. Right, so another thing that people are constantly asking me on my lives, the people that I coach one-to-one, is how much detail should I go into? Because I'm really worried that if I go on too long, it will get really boring and it's too much detail. But if I don't go on long enough, I'm not going to give them enough detail because, as I hope you know by now, the interview is about your behaviors. So you can't just say what you did. I had a meeting and we sorted it out. You have to say how you did it. I had a meeting. I prepared thoroughly for that meeting, anticipating all of the objections that I might be facing from these individuals that were coming into the meeting. When they came into the meeting, the first thing I did was tabled these obstacles to try and get those through and sorted out before we went any further into the meeting so that we could then talk specifically about my recommendation without these obstacles sitting in the minds of my audience. I just made that up on the spot, but hopefully that helps you understand the difference between what and how. You have to give details for it to be your behaviors. Anyway, because of that, people are constantly saying to me, how do I know if I've gone into enough detail or not? So here's my next trick, which is ask. Crazy idea, right? But why don't you, if you're at a point where you're not sure where to pitch it, have you gone too deep? Have you gone too high? Literally stop and say to your interviewer, I just want to check, am I giving you the right level of detail? Do you need me to go a bit deeper, or do you need me to lift it up a level? And see what they say, right? It's a dialogue, it's a meeting of two people to try and understand whether you're a good fit for each other. It's not a monologue that you have to deliver as if you are on the stage somewhere. So stop and ask them. They'll appreciate it, I promise you. So that's my next tip. Okay, so my third tip. Sometimes, this is about understanding whether you're talking about the right leadership principle, okay? So, process is going to be in your interview. Somebody asks you a question and inevitably you're going to be trying to pin it to a leadership principle so that you can make sure that you've got the right and most appropriately narratively developed story to share with them. You get going, you start telling a story, and maybe you're not quite so confident that you've identified the right leadership principle. Some of them are really obvious, like some of the customer obsession ones, like it's screamingly obvious that they're asking you about customer obsession. But sometimes some of the others aren't so obvious. Some bias for action ones, maybe deliver results, not so obvious. What you can do if you're not entirely sure that you're headed down the right road, particularly if you're getting lots of follow-up questions and interruptions, is just to pause momentarily and say, can I just double check, am I giving you the right type of information? Are you getting what you need from this? Hopefully the interviewer will say yes, and you're just doubting yourself unnecessarily. But what they might say is, oh, actually, I was particularly interested in the unanticipated obstacles. You're telling me about a project that you did that worked really well, and that's fabulous, but I want to know, did you hit anything that you weren't expecting? Okay, now they've got you back on track. Now they've told you exactly what they're looking for. So this is a really, really good tip to help you if you're not entirely sure whether you have picked up the right leadership principle. Now, sometimes interviewers, and it's happening increasingly actually from what I'm hearing back from my candidates. I don't think this was as common when I was in Amazon a year and a half, maybe a little bit more than that ago. Interviewers are literally saying, right, I'm going to ask you a customer obsession question. I wouldn't do it personally, but plenty do. So great, if you know that, wonderful. Some candidates also ask what leadership principle you're asking. So you can do that. I'm personally not a big fan of it. I was never keen when a candidate asked me that question, and what they would get from me is actually, no, I'm not going to tell you the leadership principle question. I just want you to answer the question, please. So if you're going to ask that question, be prepared to be told no, and don't have it throw you off your game. Some interviewers might give you the answer, but my tip is, if you don't want to be one of those people that asks directly, you can, if you're not entirely sure you're on the right track, just stop and double check that you're giving them the right type of information. So we're going to stop there for part 1 of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you found it useful, please do put a comment in the space below and give me a thumbs up. Part 2 will be coming out a week after part 1, so do look out for that one. Now what you need to do is click on this link here and go and grab yourself one of my free Amazon Interview Wiz Academy Customer Obsession Masterclasses. Watch that and you will nail every single customer obsession question asked of you at your Amazon interview. Or if you'd like to do that later, check out this video here for more great Amazon interview bar raiser tips on interview strategy.